All right, so this is part 2 of this topic. And let's start off, while we wait on a few people, let's just start off with a small game, right? So do you all remember how to play these games, right? I want you all, well, GB is coordinating the game there, right? I want you all in number 1, think of a country you would like to visit and write it down. So write it down, right? Write down a country you would like to visit and let me know on the chat. Okay? What are the first 2 letters of the country? So if it was, let's just say someone said Brazil. If you said Brazil, the 2 first letters would be B and R. So what are your first 2 letters in your particular country? Right? And here's how it works. If your 2 letters are the same color, you win. Well, I hope you all kept the score sheet from last week, right? Obviously, this is fake money. If your 2 letters are the same color, you win $30. So let's see if you're lucky. Are your 2 letters the same color? If so, you win. You write down $30 in your score sheet. If it's not the same colors, well, better luck next time. All right. So let me know if you want it on. All right. So let's start back with something that Jibby is saying. Remember, Jibby is like the our dim-witted protagonist, right? He's a good guy, but he isn't too smart, and usually everything that comes out his mouth is rubbish. Right. So the question, the question posed first, how does our body know how to build all these complex things? And who does the building? Remember, all living things are complex. So look at yourself. You not only have visible things like arms and legs, underneath your skin, you have all of these things. You have blood vessels, you have a heart, you have lungs behind your eyes that have all of these complex things in your eyes and inside of your brain. Really, really complex stuff that scientists don't fully understand how to create from scratch. But how does your body know how to build itself? Anybody has any suggestions on how your body knows how to build itself? What part of your body or what inside of your body has the instructions on how to build yourself? Well, one person said that your brain, let me just draw GB's brain here, right? Draw it as small as possible. That's GB's brain over there, right? So someone said, a lot of people actually said, your brain is responsible for building you. Quick question, who builds the brain? There must be something to build the brain in order to give you a brain, something to think with. All right. So that is where the answer is not brain, right? Right. So today that's what we're gonna explore. What does the building? Okay. Right. And keep in mind, a very important part is going to be proteins because almost everything in your body is made up of proteins. All your muscles and your tissues, the same tissues that make up your brain and the same tissues that make up all your muscles are at the end of the day made up of proteins. So that means whatever does the building is making proteins, and the proteins make, well, when you group them together, they make us. So anyway, let's hear what Jibby has to say about all of this. So Jibby says, after watching Jurassic Park, I learned that DNA is a special protein that lives in our cells and that builds our entire bodies for us. Never doubt Jibby. So how much of you all have heard this term DNA? For those who are Jurassic Park fans, right? You will know that in Jurassic Park, they mentioned something called DNA. Let's move to the next slide, right? So do you all remember this diagram from last week? It's the plant and animal cell. We are obviously made up of animal cells because according to biology, we are part of the animal kingdom, right? So we are animals at the end of the day. Do you all remember? It's two things we're going to be discussing in detail today. Something called the nucleus and something called the ribosomes. From last week, I told you that the nucleus is the brain of the cell. He's the boss of the cell. He tells everybody in the cell what to do. Now, inside of the nucleus, there are these things called chromosomes, and chromosomes are made up of something called DNA. Now, I want to repeat it because I know a lot of this stuff is new to you guys, to most of you all. Once again, we have an animal cell. We are made up of trillions and trillions and trillions of cells stuck together. And each cell, well, most cells, I would say 99.9999% of our cells have something called a nucleus. And inside the nucleus, there are things called chromosomes, a very fancy name, right? And chromosomes are made up of things called DNA. And you all have this diagram from last week already drawn in your books. Also inside of your cells is something called ribosomes. I want you all to go back in your notes. Last week, I gave you a table. Who can tell me in very, very simple terms what ribosomes do? Take a few seconds, go back in your notes, and I want a very simple answer. So here, ribosomes, let me get a different color here, right? Remember, I told you all proteins are very important. Almost every visible part of your body is made up of proteins, your muscles, your tissues, your brains. Don't you need somebody to make the proteins? So that is what the ribosomes do. The ribosomes make proteins. Now, here's the thing. In your body, now proteins, when I say the word proteins, it makes it sound simple, right? Like it have one or two types of proteins. Inside of your body, do you know, you all want to take a guess without Googling? How many different types of proteins on average do you think you have inside of your body? Because there are many different types of proteins, right? And of course, the different proteins do different things in your body, right? I'm getting some guesses. It's roughly 100,000 different types of proteins in your body. I find that really, really amazing, right? So you see these ribosomes here, these yellow dots, they are capable of making roughly 100,000 different types of proteins. Amazing, right? That must be a very, very smart, complex structure, okay? But here's the thing, right? Ribosomes cannot make the proteins on its own. No, don't get me wrong. It does a very big part of making the proteins, right? Don't get me wrong. It does a very huge part, but it needs some help. Guess who helps it to make the proteins, right? It's not actually DNA. DNA helps a little bit. But inside of the nucleus, and a lot of people don't know this, a lot of people know about this thing called DNA. But how much of you all have heard about his evil brother, RNA? Not evil, I just call him the evil brother. How much of you all have heard of RNA? When you watch movies, there's only talk about DNA, DNA. DNA is responsible for making everything. But nobody talks about Mr. RNA. Like he's not a hero. Like he's nobody important, right? You see Mr. Ribosome here, the yellow dot? A lot of people don't know this, right? I'll get some yellow. Ribosomes are made inside of the nucleus first, right? So he's actually born inside of the nucleus, and then he's kicked out to live on its own, right? So, and I will mention that again, right? Because I know somebody is, when I'm doing the explanation, is going to ask, hey, sir, what made the ribosome in the first place? Who made the ribosomes? And I'm telling you now, it's made inside of the nucleus using something called DNA and RNA. And when ribosomes are made, they are kicked out. Okay? Right. You don't have to take down anything. You'll be hearing it over and over. So, I know I have a lot of questions on the chat, right? Some of them I won't be able to answer them today, right? I don't want to go off topic. So, let's talk about proteins. What foods, like if you wanted foods that were high in protein, last week we did this. Can you tell me what foods you would eat if you wanted plenty protein? Give me some examples now. I'll start you off with chicken. Chicken meat has a lot of proteins. Anybody else want to tell me what other foods contains proteins? Right. So things with meat, well, meat on the whole has what? Proteins, like almost any kind of meat, right? Well, every meat, right? Doesn't matter if it's pork, doesn't matter if it's beef, doesn't matter chicken, fish, things like meat, eggs, soya, right? Peas, right? Any type of peas will have a lot of what? Protein. Here's the thing. When we eat proteins, our body will take these proteins, you notice all the different colors, right? And our digestive system will break down these proteins into smaller parts. So you see what it is? It's like building blocks or Lego blocks, right? You notice this entire thing is broken down into smaller pieces. These smaller individual pieces are called amino acids. And in the human body, it have about, no, not about, there are 20 amino acids. Now, I know I don't have 20 blocks here, right? I just didn't have time to draw 20 blocks, right? But there are 20, you see, when we eat and whatnot, proteins and whatnot, our body is capable of making or breaking down everything to 20 different types of amino acids. So what our body will do now is group these amino acids. A quick question. Are individual amino acids protein? Is it okay to call each individual block a type of protein? Remember, each individual block is called an amino acid. What I'm asking is each individual block also a protein? The answer is no. The answer is no. You only get to call it proteins when you group them together. Only when you group them together, then you could call it a protein. So what our body will do now, once it has the individual amino acids, it will start to group them in individual patterns. You notice all of these patterns look different? Or I could spend the next 2 years grouping these amino acids in different configurations. Remember, how much proteins is the body capable of making? 100,000. So there are 100,000 different ways your body can combine these individual amino acids, these Lego blocks. And if I give you some Lego blocks, like with a whole set of different colors, And you could spend whole day grouping them into different patterns. Think about it. You could group a red with a blue, blue with a green, or red, blue, and green with a little purple on top. You could spend, so your body can group these amino acids in 100,000 different ways. And each one is called a protein, and each protein does something slightly different from the other protein. Okay? So here's what I want you all to do. I know you're not going to have plenty different colors, but do you all think you all could draw this quickly for me in your books, right? And take down the notes on top. You could use, if you need different colors, like if you didn't bring color pencils, you could just do what? Use pencil, that is gray. Use a blue ink. Use a red ink and a black ink. So you don't have to draw like 10 different colors. You could probably use what? 4 different colors. So everyone take down this. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. All right, so let's see the connection between DNA, RNA, and and something called the ribosomes. Well, I think you all kind of know what a ribosome is. Let's say you had to build a rocket ship. I want you to consider your body as a well, your body is complex, right? And let's assume that your body is a rocket ship, right? And it's very, very complex. To make something as complex as a rocket ship, don't you need a design? A design, well, in engineering terms, is called a blueprint. This here is your blueprint. It shows you the different parts of the rocket ship and how to put it together and all the exact measurements. So you need a design, okay? Now, this design looks very complex, right? If I give the average person on the street this design, do you think they will understand it? Like, let's say I walk down Port of Spain Street and I show someone, hey, that design there. Do you think they'll be like, oh, I understand this design. I can now build a rocket ship? No, right? It takes a very experienced person to interpret the design, right? It takes a very experienced person. You need an engineer, right? To do what? You need an engineer to interpret the design and make sense of it. So the engineer will be like, he will read the design and say, all right, I understand it now. In real life, does the engineer actually build the rocket ship, or do the construction workers build the rocket ship? Think about it in real life. The answer is no, right? The engineer doesn't actually go on site and hold the hammer and the saw and the welding torch. All the engineer does really is interpret the design, make sure that he understands the design, and he explains it to the construction worker, and he kind of supervises the construction worker. But the person who actually does the physical work of welding everything together is the construction worker. So you all see the connection there, right? Let's put that in terms of DNA, RNA, and the ribosomes. The blueprint is your DNA, right? And your DNA is found inside, I don't know why I put inside as 2 words just now. The DNA is found inside your nucleus. In every cell inside the nucleus, there is something called DNA. I noticed something about the drawing for DNA. You all see 2 strands here. One pink strand, I color it in pink, right? And then there's another strand going the opposite way, I put it in blue. So DNA, when I'm drawing it for you, right, is made up of 2 strands, right? DNA is also called double-stranded, right? It has 2 strands. The engineer, right, is called RNA. So what RNA does, it will analyze the DNA. Remember, the DNA is the plan for the rocket ship. So the RNA goes up to the DNA and investigates the DNA and learns to understand how to make the proteins. Once the RNA understands, remember, he's the engineer, once he understands the design of the protein and he knows how to build the protein, he will go to who? Mr. Ribosomes, and the ribosome is the construction worker. And once the information, once the RNA goes to the ribosomes, he's going to explain exactly to the ribosome how to make it. And the ribosome will say, all right, I know how to make the proteins now. I will go and build these proteins. Now, one thing about RNA, RNA is found inside the nucleus and it's also found in the cytoplasm. So in other words, the RNA could travel between the nucleus and the ribosomes. So he could go back and forth. And you're going to learn that there are different types of RNA today, right? There are different types of RNA. I want you all to take down everything here on the screen. I know it seems complex, but you can simplify the diagrams. This here, you just have to draw a rectangle and put design. You can just draw a stick man here, call him engineer. Another stick man that looks slightly different and call him what? Construction worker. And underneath here, to draw the DNA, just draw something like this. It have to be perfect, right? RNA only has one strand, by the way, right? So it's very easy to tell the difference between DNA and RNA. And when you're drawing the ribosome, you just have to draw a circle and call it what? Ribosome. But I want you all to see the connection or clearly understand the connection between DNA, RNA, and ribosomes and how it's connected or similar to a design of a rocket ship. Let me know when you are finished. Right? You don't have to draw the world's best diagrams. There's something okay-ish. All right, so you're going to see some very fancy words, right? Do me a favor. You're just going to have to memorize this for your exams, especially those who do in biology, right? They just real test you extensively on like the differences of the different parts of DNA and RNA. First of all, it's very important to know DNA, well, normally, right, it is found inside the nucleus, right? Well, in human beings and animals generally, it's found inside the nucleus. DNA doesn't really leave the nucleus. He's like one of those persons who has lived his whole life inside of the nucleus. RNA, he's a little bit more adventurous. Sometimes he will be inside the nucleus, and sometimes he will step outside the nucleus into the cytoplasm and go where? Visit the ribosomes. So RNA, he's more adventurous. Both DNA and RNA, you see these little strips, right? The little curvy strips, they are made up of a substance called sugar phosphate. You have to memorize. I know some of you are going to ask, what is sugar phosphate? For the time being, let's just learn the names off, right? Exactly what is sugar phosphate? Like if you were to put sugar phosphate underneath a microscope, exactly what you would see, it's not on the syllabus, right? You just need to know that DNA and RNA, the backbone of it, right? The circular thing is made up of something called sugar phosphate. And DNA has how much backbones? It has two backbones. RNA is much more simple, right? And it only has one backbone. These things that are in between that connect the backbones, right? This is supposed to be common I, right? The upper capital I here by mistake, but I'll put a dot on top. It's called nitrogenous bases. And if you all will notice, it comes in pairs. 1, 2. Pairs mean two, right? 1, 2. So DNA, it has two backbones, each made of something called sugar phosphate. And in between, you have something called nitrogenous pairs. Does RNA have pairs of nitrogenous bases? Does it have pairs? They usually come what? Single, right? But don't get me wrong, sometimes the RNA could curl up on itself. Like if this top part were to curl up like this. So let me pretend we curl this part upwards, right? Won't these here join together with those? Y'all can use the imagination here. The top part curls up on top, and then these nitrogenous bases meet these nitrogenous bases. So technically, RNA could have bases if it could curl up on itself. But that's for later on, for people who are doing biology, right? Late into at the end of biology, your teacher will explain how RNA could curl up on itself and the bases could meet to make pairs. Okay? But for the time being, let's just go with RNA. Normally, if it does not curl up on itself, the nitrogenous bases are single. They are not paired up. Right? Great. Take down everything on the screen, right? All right. So you're going to hear some fancy words today, and it's at the top of your screen. And yes, I will ask you to draw this, but I want you to pay attention because this will take a lot of concentration to understand. There's something called transcription and something called translation. First of all, it's obvious that both words start with the letter T, and it's so easy to confuse. But don't worry, I'm going to explain the difference. This big circle, this big, huge circle here, is supposed to be an animal cell, right? Obviously, I had to simplify it. This structure here is obviously your nucleus. And this pink circle is called your ribosome. Now, if you look carefully at the diagrams, right, it's very easy to figure out which one is the DNA and RNA, even if I did not label it. The ones with the single loops are called RNA. Look at it. All my RNA have single loops. And the DNA have what? Double loops. So it's going to be very easy, even by diagram purposes, even without labeling, to figure out who is DNA and who is RNA. Let's see how much you all remember. This ribosome here, right? This ribosome, where was he made in the first place? Where was his birthplace? Do you all remember from earlier? Right, I'm looking at your answers on the chat here. Take part, guys. Right, I see a lot of you all remembered. The ribosomes, who are responsible for making proteins, he's like a protein factory with construction workers in him. He was made, let me draw him in pink here. He was made inside the nucleus. So that pink dot there he is a ribosome. And when he gets big enough, the nucleus kicks him out. He's like, bye-bye, you have to go live on your own now. If you all will notice, right, there are 3 types of RNA. Look at the diagram properly. It has something called common T RNA. It has something called common mRNA. And then it has something called common RNA, right? So there are 3 types of RNA, but only 1 type of DNA. We're keeping the DNA simple, right? To create And I know some of you are gonna have questions, right? I'm gonna tell you like something makes something, and then the most obvious question will be, what makes that something? And when I explain what something makes that something, your mind will naturally say, but what makes this something to make this something? And we'll keep going back, we'll keep backtracking like that, right? I need for you all just to take my word for it. If I say something makes something, let's leave it at that. What makes this something? It's not on the syllabus. Like what makes this something to make this something right now? It's not on the syllabus. Okay. So if I tell you, right, that something makes the ribosome, inside the nucleus, there is this specific type of RNA called the rRNA, and he makes what? The ribosome, right? So let me just put a little comic bubble here. I'll make the ribosome, right? I'm not going to answer the question of who makes the rRNA. Just accept up to that point for me, right? So inside the nucleus, there's a special type of RNA called common rRNA, that will make what? The ribosome, right? And when this ribosome gets too big, the nucleus is going to kick him out. Great. So now we have our ribosomes. And what's the purpose of the ribosome again? His purpose is to make what? Proteins. All right. So this ribosome is ready. He's like, I'm ready. I'm all grown up and I'm ready to make proteins. So inside the nucleus now, there is another type of RNA called mRNA. Common M, it has to be common mRNA, right? And what he will do, this guy here, he will go and investigate the DNA. Remember I told you all earlier, the DNA has the instructions on how to build the proteins. He's the blueprint. He's the design. This RNA, who is he? According to, is he the construction worker or the engineer? This mRNA, who is he? He is the engineer, right? This mRNA is the engineer. Remember, what's the purpose of the engineer? He has to go and investigate the design and learn about the design and make sure he understands it. So this here comes like the blueprint. The DNA is the blueprint or the design. So look at the caption here. The mRNA is saying, I will learn all your secrets, Mr. DNA, right? So he learns about it. And once he understands the design, guess what he does? He comes out of the nucleus and he journeys to what? The ribosome. You notice inside the ribosome is mRNA also. That's the same mRNA. The engineer jumps in his car and he drives to the ribosome factory. And guess what he will do? The engineer will explain everything to the ribosome. Isn't the ribosome the construction worker? So once the ribosome or the construction worker understands how to build the proteins, he will be like, all right, it's time to build the rocket ship or time to build the proteins. Quick question. If you are building a rocket ship, won't you need materials? Won't you need metal? Won't you need welding rods? Won't you need screws and well, not nails, probably just screws and probably all different types of materials. Does that make sense? If you are building a rocket ship, you need materials. The same thing goes for proteins. When the ribosome says, hey, I'm ready to build the proteins, I need materials. What's the name of the material? Think back quickly. What's the name of the materials needed to build proteins? I'll give you a hint. Starts with the letter A. Remember, the ribosome is ready to build the proteins, but it needs materials. What's the name of the materials? Amino acids. Correct. So you see all these fancy blocks here, right? All these little, the diamond, the whatever that is, hexagon, heptagon, whatever, and the triangles. These are the amino acids. Now, here's what. The amino acids don't live inside of the ribosomes. The amino acids is be floating around inside of the cell, in the cytoplasm, right? It's just be floating around. You need to hire special RNA called tRNA. These tRNAs will go out into the cell, latch on to the amino acids. It will go capture the amino acids, the specific amino acids, and it will bring it inside of the ribosomes. And once the amino acids go into the ribosomes, right? The ribosomes, the construction workers, will begin to build the specific proteins. It could be any of the 100,000 proteins. Okay? Right? You all understand it there now? I know it's a lot to take in, right? I know it's a lot to take in, right? I understand all of that. But I have a table afterwards, right? Explaining this in more detail, right? Let's do my small, I just want to clear up this diagram for you guys here, right? I want to take out that. I want to take out this arrow here, right? Everything else on the screen, I want you to take it down, right? Let me know when you are finished. And of course, I know I haven't explained what transcription is and what translation is as yet. Draw the diagram, and then I would explain exactly what transcription is in that explanation and what exactly translation is in this scenario. Let me know when you guys are finished. I'm going to give you a full 5 minutes for this one. Next slide. Right. Transcription is when the engineer is making sense of the DNA. Remember, the whole point of the engineer is to investigate the DNA. The DNA is the major part of the plan, right? Is the plan. And he has to understand it. So that the fancy name for that is what? Transcription. That's the mRNA making sense of the blueprint. Translation is when the ribosomes are actually making the protein. That whole process of making the proteins, you see, when you write, I know I spelled ribosome wrong here, right? It's R-I-B-O, right? Right? So, well, you all know the correct spelling, right? I have to correct it right now. So, translation is when the ribosomes begin to make the actual protein, right? That is all it really means, right? Transcription is the engineer making sense of the plan, and translation is when the ribosomes starts to make the proteins, okay? So let's move on to the next slide. Like I said, I think I have all of this explained in detail on the next slide. Let's move on. Right, so we're going to be summarizing the different types of ribosomes and what they do and whatnot. Remember, one of them is mRNA, tRNA, and rRNA. And the names actually make sense, right? Like rRNA, doesn't he make the ribosome in the first place? The rRNA lives inside of the nucleus, and he makes the ribosome. So it's fitting to name him common rRNA, where the common R stands for ribosomal RNA. He makes the ribosome. The M stands for messenger RNA. The mRNA is the engineer, right? I'll put it here. He's the engineer. Because doesn't he go in between the nucleus and the ribosome? he delivers a message between the nucleus and the ribosome. The engineer come like the messenger who delivers all the instructions because he understands it now. And the tRNA is the transfer RNA. These are the guys who go hunt for the correct amino acids and they bring it back or drag it back to the ribosome so the workers can start to build what? The new proteins, right? I think everything is self-explanatory. You can give it a read, but I think I went through everything here in detail when I was talking earlier, right? So everyone take down this entire table and let me know when you are finished. So, all right, so we're gonna get a little bit more complex here, right? Remember I said there was something called DNA, right? So let's start off with, it's just some terms you're going to hear later on, right? It's not the world's most detailed explanation. DNA are basically the blueprints. It carries all the instructions, right? It carries all the necessary plans or designs to make the organism, right? So however, DNA is like a piece of thread, right? A piece of thread. You all know what a spool. You all know what a spool of thread is. I'm hoping you all know what a spool of thread. You know when you take. Just let me know if you all know what a spool of thread is. I have a good feeling a few people don't know what a spool of thread is, right? You know those seamstresses. Like if you have a piece of plastic, right, and you take the thread and wrap it around, right? If you take thread and wrap it around something, that's supposed to be me. That whole thing is called what? A spool of thread. Now, isn't it possible, right? Isn't it possible to take the thread and unravel it like that? If you take a spool of thread and unravel it, won't it be very, very, very long? Okay. Quick question. The material that thread is made up of, what material is thread mostly made up of? Anybody knows? Right, a lot of it's right. It's a good answer. Wool, right? Well, not all thread is made up of wool, but we're gonna go with wool. So thread is made up of a material, and the name of that material is called wool. Now, if you unravel the thread, you just call it a string of thread, or you just call it a string, right? However, when you wrap up the thread and in a nice, neat pattern, you just call it what? A spool. So isn't it safe to say that a spool and a string of thread is made up of the same exact material? Both are the same exact thing, right? A spool is just when you take the thread and wrap it neatly, so it takes up a smaller amount of space. Inside your nucleus, right? This is supposed to be your nucleus. You see all these neat things here? They are called chromosomes, right? And if you take chromosomes and unravel it, the chromosomes come like a spool. But if you take the chromosomes and unravel it, you get a long string of what? DNA. This very, very long string is called your DNA. So is it safe to say that a chromosome is made up of the same exact material DNA is made up of? Is that a fair statement? That DNA and chromosomes are made up of the same exact material? The only difference between the two really is like how a thread, well, when it's a string, when it's unraveled, you call it what? A string. And when you curl it up in a nice, neat ball, you call it a spool. The same thing goes for DNA and chromosomes, right? Great. Now, here's the thing. This long strand of DNA contains all the instructions on how to build you. Quick question for those who know. Inside the human body, inside each of our nucleus, like each of us is made up of trillions of cells. And inside each cell, there's a nucleus. How much chromosomes are inside each of our cells? How much spools of thread can be found inside each cell? So we extract one cell, we zoom into the nucleus. How much chromosomes or spools do we find? For those who reach real far in this, in like integrated science and whatnot in school, I think it's actually 46. We only have inside our body, we only have 46 chromosomes. So we have 46 spools. I didn't have time to draw all 46, right? I only draw how much? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But we really have 46 chromosomes in all. And each of those 46 chromosomes contain different information, believe it or not. Each of those 46 chromosomes contain different information on how to build our body. Now, at first glance, if you take one chromosome and unravel it to get a long string of DNA, remember this whole strand is called DNA, it looks like one string. And it looks like the string pattern repeats over and over and over and over. And it actually looks sort of useless. But that's to the untrained eye. If you zoom in or analyze a strand of DNA very, very carefully, take the example here. Here I have a chromosome. Let's pretend I unravel it, right? Doesn't this look like a whole set of jumbled letters, nonsensical letters, like I just randomly type letters? But if you zoom in and concentrate, do you all see words within them? Look at it carefully. Do you all see actual words? Let me know, zoom in. I'm going to zoom in. Use your eyes and focus. I'm saying zoom in. If you look carefully, right, you all seeing words. Look at it, look at it. You all see, look at, I'm just going to underline it. You will see the words green eyes. And after that, you will see brown hair. Then big nose. And then small ears. All right, I'm going on. So if you look carefully and you notice all the words are together, right? So round face, big teeth, broad shoulders. The same thing goes on with DNA. You know? To the untrained eye, it looks like gibberish. But when you zoom in and you analyze it, you realize, wait now, this DNA has specific pieces of information, and each part of the strand is different from the other part. It's a code, a message, if you look at it properly. Right. You see each part here? Each part that gives you a specific instruction is called a gene. So each part of the DNA is called a gene. Now, you can't choose any piece of the DNA and call it a gene. A gene is a specific part of the ENA with specific instructions. So that's the difference between a chromosome, a gene, and a DNA. As a DNA is the whole strand. When you wrap up the whole DNA into a nice spool, you call it a chromosome. And a gene is part of the DNA, sections of the DNA that has specific instructions or related instructions to tell you how to build that person. Like this person here will have green eyes, brown hair, a big nose, small ears, a round face, big teeth, and broad shoulders, right? And each one of these instructions to do something about the body is called a gene. All right, and I'm going to ask you to draw this, but I want you to screenshot it. Let me know when you are ready. When you finish screenshotting, right? So in other words, genes, DNA, and chromosomes are all made up of the same material, right? They're all made up of the different, but it's how you interpret it. Like if the DNA is folded up, you call the whole thing a chromosome. If you take out a certain section of the DNA that has specific instructions, it's called a gene. Right. Let's pause in it here. All right, so we have a little game here to play. So this one is very, very simple, right? You just choose two numbers, and if your two numbers happen to have the same color, you win $15. Well, fake $15. All right, so you all know how to play this one from last week. Let's get the music going. But I know the answer for this one, so I can't play. Anybody won? Anyone? Michael win, Zarian didn't win, Denise won, Jaden won, somebody, name somebody won. Dean won, Jadel won, Dina won. A lot of winners. Bruce, Matthias, Bruce won. Right. Don't worry, guys, if you didn't win, you have better luck next time. Go. Anybody on YouTube won? All right, how about a little questions and how about a small quiz based on last week's work and today's work for money? All right, here's what you have to do. You have 3 questions on the screen, right? Get 3 questions in a row correct and you win $10. Everyone send you, without Google it, try your best not to Google, but you're welcome to go back in the notes you made, right? Answer the red, blue, and green question. Now, when you send any answers, answer all 3 and then send it for me. Put R for red. So if the answer for the red one is A, put R, that's not one. Put R is A. So, oh, red is A, and blue is what, and green is what, right? So I'll know which answer is which one. Good luck, and if you get all 3 correct, you win a fake $10. The first one. Which of the following is not a macronutrient? Remember, macro means your body needs it, and macro means plenty or large. So macronutrients are things your body needs in bulk, like it needs a lot of it. The answer for this one has to be C, vitamins, right? So, because carbohydrates, proteins, and fats are macronutrients, vitamins are not macro. Your body doesn't need a lot and a lot of vitamins. So it needs a little bit of it. So vitamins is what you call micronutrients. He's a micronutrient. The blue one. Which part of the plant cell is responsible for photosynthesis? Photosynthesis is how plants make their food. Quick question. When photosynthesis is done, right? Plants need food, right? What's the name of the food that plants make from photosynthesis? So the plant does photosynthesis to make food. I'm asking what's the name of the food created? It starts with the letter G. What's the name of the food the plant makes from photosynthesis? Right, it's glucose. Right? Photosynthesis is how plants make glucose. And of course, plants well, I'm using this term very loosely, eat the glucose or use the glucose in a process called respiration to make energy. All right. So, and the answer for this one here is the chloroplast, right? The chloroplast contains a green substance called chlorophyll, and the chlorophyll helps to trap sunlight, and photosynthesis happens in that part of the plant. Green one, which organelle? Now, is organ and organelle the same thing? No, an organ is like part of your body. Organ, that's like your heart, your lungs, right? Your liver. Organelles are the small things that live inside of a cell. So things living inside of a cell, like the nucleus and mitochondria and ribosomes and all of those things, those are called organelles. So which organelle is known as the powerhouse of the cell? In other words, which part of the cell produces energy? Where does respiration happen? And the answer for that one, everyone should know it by now, is the mitochondria. How much people won the $10? Who got all three correct without my assistance? All right, three more questions, guys, and this one is for $15. You have to get all three correct. Red, blue, green. Okay. Good luck. What is the main function of ribosomes? But I've been saying that over and over today. The purpose of ribosomes is to make proteins, right? Now, I know I use a fancy word, right? Synthesize proteins just means make proteins, right? Synthesize means to make, fancy word. Which gas is a byproduct of photosynthesis? So if you look back at your equation from last week, look for photosynthesis. What gas is produced at the end of photosynthesis? And it's going to be oxygen. And the green one, remember, the smallest organelles are things that live inside of the cells. So when you put the organelles together, you get a cell. You put cells together, you get a tissue. You put different types of tissues together, you get organs. And when you put plenty organs together, you get organ systems. The answer is obviously B. Who got all three correct without my assistance? You need to get all three correct in order to get the $15, right? Even if you get one wrong, it's zero. Last, I think this is the last one here. This is the hardest one. You need for $20. You have to get all four correct. You have red, blue, green, and yellow. So this is mostly based on today's work. Let's see if you can get all four correct. I'm going to give you slightly more time to get it out. Right. Which of the following structures is the largest, right? The answer has to be the chromosome, right? Remember, the chromosome is when you wrap up everything together like a spool. Here's a spool of thread, right? Right? So the chromosome, right? What is a gene? Well, a gene is a segment of the DNA. Remember when we had the DNA strand? I told you all only certain parts of it, each part that makes sense or has a certain code in it, that part is called the gene, right? So the answer would be C. For the green one, which of the following which of the following best describes the relationship between DNA and chromosomes? Chromosomes is made up of DNA. Remember, DNA is the material, like wool. So the whole spool is made up of DNA, right? The whole unraveled spool is called DNA. What is the main function of RNA in the cells? Well, nobody's supposed to get this wrong. The answer is C, right? One of the main functions is to carry the instructions from the DNA. Remember, he's the engineer. He will decode the DNA, make sense of it, and carry it to the ribosomes for protein synthesis or to make proteins. Who got the $20? None wrong. Like you got all three correct. And don't forget to screenshot, right? Even if you got it wrong, once you tried your best, for those who did not get all four correct, but at least tried and you submitted answers, I will give you a complimentary $3. Right? All winning money will be delivered not before the year 2089, right? So before 2089, keep checking your mailboxes and your money will be delivered. All right? All right. So I hope you all screenshotted there, right? Right. Can't say I'm not a generous person. Right. So we're almost at the end of class, right? And we're going to be starting from this slide next week. We're going to be talking about, actually the main topic next week is not going to be ribosomes, but you're going to have to remember what a ribosome is. So next week I will start off class, kind of just refresh your memory what a ribosome is. And then we're going to discuss how to classify life. How much of you all have done that in school? The classification of life. Like if you find an organism, how do you know how to classify that organism? Like how do you figure out whether it's a plant or animal? And if it's an animal, what kind of animal? Like what makes a wolf a wolf? What makes a giraffe, right? And are giraffes and hippopotamuses, hippopotamus, I'm going to use a word I can pronounce. Are giraffes and lions related? Yes or no? So we're going to learn how to classify animals or living organisms next week and find out which organism is related to other organisms. All right. So guys, see you next week. Anybody here doesn't know how to access the recording, stay back and I will gladly explain. The rest of you all, you're free to leave and thank you for coming to class today.